Hey, I'm Rick, but my friends call me Head. I work at a CBS station in Atlanta as a broadcast engineer. I study electrical engineering and computer science at MIT and also learned about broadcast technologies. I've been doing this job for 22 years, working in different places before settling in Atlanta. I'm 46 years old, tall, and weigh around 190 pounds. I'm married to Sharon for 22 years, and we have two daughters, Melanie and Stephanie. Melanie is married already, and Stephanie is almost done with college. Sharon is around 5'5" tall, weighs less than 135 pounds, and has long blonde hair. She's a really kind person both inside and out. Lately, she's been working as a secretary for our pastor, Reverend Bob Shelter, for about a year and a half. Let me tell you about what happened last Friday. I had some extra time for lunch, so I decided to surprise Sharon by taking her out. Because it was raining, I parked at the side entrance of the church office to be closer to the door. However, when I got there, Sharon's office was empty. I went inside anyway and overheard Sharon talking to Pastor Bob in his office. She was excited about Monday night and mentioned how nice it is that I work on the Monday night football games, as it gives us a chance to spend time together. She also asked about a reservation at the Inn. Pastor Bob assured her, yes, it's all set. I've booked the Whirlpool suite again. Come over here and let me show it to you right now. I heard some sounds of clothes moving and then Sharon's sounds of pleasure. I was shocked and felt sick, and my anger was growing. I knew I had to leave before doing something foolish. I couldn't bear to listen anymore. I wanted to confront them but stopped myself because I knew I might lose control and get physical in my emotional state. I knew I'd end up hurting both of them, but I also didn't want to face the consequences of my actions. So I made the tough choice to walk away, even though it was one of the hardest things I have ever done. I wanted to explode with anger, but I chose to leave instead. I was pretty sure neither of them noticed me or knew I had been there. They had security cameras watching the main entrances of the church. But I had entered and exited through the side door without being seen. I was so shaken that I realized I wouldn't be able to focus for the rest of the day. I called my workplace and explained that I wasn't feeling well, saying I needed to go home. I needed time to think about what had just happened, and being at home seemed like the best place for that. Sharon wouldn't be home until after 4:00 p.m., giving me plenty of time to process everything. It became clear to me that Sharon was having an affair with Pastor Bob, and I decided that I couldn't continue to see him as my pastor. I felt a strong need to uncover the full extent of their relationship, how long it had been going on, and what had led to it. Some people might prefer not to dig into these details, thinking they don't matter, but that's not me. I really wanted to understand why this happened in what I thought was a great marriage, apparently not so great from Sharon's perspective. She wasn't the sweet person I thought she was, and I was determined to find out the truth. I wasn't weak, and I was set on making sure they faced the consequences of their actions. Once I got home, I made some coffee and sat outside on the patio, hoping the nice weather would help clear my mind. I needed to make sense of everything that had happened. I won't deny that I shed a few tears that afternoon because I did. I know I don't own Sharon or her choices, but it really hurt me to think she had been intimate with another man, or maybe more, when she promised herself to me on our wedding day. Some people might not take those vows seriously, but I did, and I thought she did too. It makes you question your whole belief system and wonder if you've been naive your whole life about loyalty and love, and all that goes along with it. Dealing with a cheating partner isn't just about the physical act, it's about losing trust in everything they say or do. It's like thinking they always had your back during your marriage only to find out they don't, leaving you feeling exposed and scared. Even though I'm a big guy at 6'3" tall and 190 pounds, I felt vulnerable and frightened. It shows how a cheating spouse can really impact someone's emotional well-being. As I sat there, trying to stay calm and think logically so I could process everything, I realized there were things I had questioned in the past but ignored because I trusted Sharon. These were small things that didn't seem important at the time, but now weighed heavily on me as I connected the dots. It's tough when trust is broken, especially when you've believed in someone so deeply. I wanted solid information. I needed to know why this happened, how long it had been going on, where it happened, and who else was involved. My trust had been shattered, and I was determined to uncover the truth. As an update, I didn't feel ready to face Sharon without showing my emotions. So, at 3:00 p.m., I left the house before she got back. I went into town and stopped by the station to grab a few things I'd need for the next few days. I went to see my boss and asked for a couple of days off early in the week, explaining that I was dealing with personal issues and feeling unwell. He agreed, so I left and went to Frankie's to pass the time until I had to go home around 5 p.m. I called Sharon to let her know I'd be out for a while and wouldn't be home for dinner. She seemed annoyed and mentioned feeling romantic tonight, hinting at a treat I would miss out on. However, my plans were set, so I told her to keep the mood warm, promising to make it up to her later. She responded sternly, saying not to count on it and that I wouldn't be getting anything for a while if I continued to treat her that way. Deep down, I realized that this was exactly what I wanted to happen. I got home around 10:30 p.m., feeling quite drunk, but not too drunk to notice the bedroom door was locked. I chuckled at that and knocked to see if she was awake, though I doubted it. I yelled, "Fine, if this is the game you want to play, then don't expect any intimacy from me. Just deal with it." With that, I went to sleep in a spare bedroom. The next morning, she was sitting at the kitchen table having her coffee. I could sense a shift in her demeanor when I walked in. If I hadn't known she was being unfaithful, I would have still felt that something was wrong. I smiled at her and said, "You don't need to make breakfast. I'll grab something on my way to the golf course." I then left the kitchen, got my golf clubs from the garage, and drove off. Shortly after, my phone rang and I saw it was her calling, so I decided not to answer. A few minutes later, I got a voicemail from her, filled with anger, asking how I could do this to her and demanding I come back immediately. The truth was, I had no intention of actually going golfing. I used that as an excuse to buy myself some time to handle things. My real destination was my former church. I didn't want to hear Bob preach again. Since it was early, I knew there might not be many people around, and I was right. I had a key to the building because my wife worked there. I went straight to the offices to set up remote micro cameras and mini microphones in her office and Bob's office. It didn't take me long, and I hid the transmitter behind some old hymnals in the supply closet across the hall. I had the receiver in my trunk and wired it into my car's electrical system. This way, I could monitor their conversations and activities whenever they were in their offices. While I didn't expect much to happen at the church, I was sure I would gather valuable information by watching and listening to them for a few days. Once I confirmed everything was working correctly, I searched through her desk but found nothing important. However, I did see a big asterisk on her calendar for Monday, matching what I heard on Friday. I would be ready for whatever might happen on that day. After searching through Bob's office without much success, I had a sudden idea. I decided to check the filing cabinets for church expense receipts. To my surprise, I found a file with receipts from the L Inn in Roswell, dating back to the end of 2019 and the spring of 2020. Realizing I shouldn't stay too long, I quickly made copies of the receipts and tidied up before leaving. My next stop was the golf course, where I parked and went to the clubhouse. I wanted to make sure people saw me there, so I sat at the bar and ordered a Sprite, spending a couple of hours there. I spent time analyzing the receipts and noticed that the ones from late 2019 were both for Mondays, and the ones from spring 2020 matched the dates of a conference I attended in New York. What angered me most was that Bob had billed those motel rooms to the church as meeting rentals, disguising his rendezvous with my wife. I had unknowingly paid for their meetings while supporting the church. I decided to stop donating to the church. Their time of reckoning was near, and I just needed a bit more evidence to confirm everything. I was sure this affair had been ongoing for almost a year or more, which matched the hints I had noticed earlier. I suspected Bob had been involved with her even before she started working for him. It was quite a shock to realize she had willingly taken a job at the church, despite having a good position at Telfer Corporation. She had been enthusiastic about it, saying, "It's so close to home, and I'll be working for the church. What could be better than that? Plus, the pay is almost as good as what I was making at Telfer. How can I pass this up?" At the time, it all sounded great, close to home, church employment, and decent pay. However, looking back, it was clear she was more interested in the extra perks. I felt a mix of anger and deep disappointment. It was hard to believe that my loving wife could betray me like this. I was determined to make them both face the consequences of their actions. I decided it was time to gather more information. I connected my iPod to the receiver in my car's trunk and tuned it to the frequency. After a few minutes, I saw Bob entering his office. He picked up the phone and made a call. I wish I had bugged his phone, but it was too late for that. I could only hear one side of the conversation. Yes, Sharon, I'm at the church. I came as soon as you called. What's wrong? I wondered if this was a common occurrence. I see. What triggered his reaction? Then he asked, do you think he suspects anything? Sharon laughed and he said, all right, you can get back at him on Monday night. After the call, he sat and thought for a bit. Just as I was about to stop listening, he said something quietly, but I caught it. I saved that part, thinking it might be useful later. Then I drove home. I thought it might be cold there, so I mowed the lawn and did some chores in the basement. When I got inside, she didn't say much, but I could feel the tension. During dinner, I ignored her, and she stared at me. Later, she tried to talk, asking why I'd been acting strange. I reminded her that she locked me out of our room and that I rarely went out with my friends. I mentioned that the one time I went out, she got upset. I did. She got upset and made threats, so the situation was because of her actions, not mine. She replied angrily. I noticed her language wasn't what you'd expect from a devout Christian. With her strong faith, her reaction showed guilt, and I couldn't see how she thought I wouldn't notice. But she regained her composure and left the table. I thought she wouldn't handle things well when everything came out. Later, she came into the family room where I was watching TV, looking like she had been crying. The rest of the evening went by without any big problems. When I was ready for bed, I went to the spare room and got settled. A few minutes later, she came into the room and stood there. I asked her, what do you want? She asked if I was coming to bed. I said, nope. You made it clear there won't be any closeness soon, so I'll sleep well alone here. She left crying, but I didn't care. On Sunday morning, she woke me at 8:00 a.m. ready for church and asked if I'd come. I said no, explaining I had no plans to go. She looked like she was starting to understand. Later, she left the house, and we didn't talk much throughout the day, each staying in our own rooms. Monday morning, I left without seeing her or talking. She called, crying, apologizing, and saying she loved me. I said we'd talk later and hung up. Then I told my boss I was off but would still cover the Monday night football game. He was fine with it and asked how things were going. I said everything was normal. Next, I went to the Aita Inn in Roswell. Update, I walked into the motel lobby trying to look like a regular guy on business. I saw the clerk, Kevin, who seemed more into his phone than anything else. I approached him with a clipboard. Hey, I have a service call for the Whirlpool suite, I said, tapping on the fake work order I had made up, complaining about the AC making noise. You know how it is with this heat, right? Kevin looked over the clipboard, looking a bit puzzled. I kept a serious face, trying to seem professional. Which room? He asked, still sounding a bit confused. I gave him the suite number, and for a moment, I thought he might question me, but then he just nodded, gave me the key card, and said, get it done quickly. Okay. I got into the room fast, setting down my tool bag. Instead of tools, I had high-tech gear like microphones and cameras. I pretended to fix things while actually setting up my own plan to catch my wife in the act. Setting up the gear was easy. I hid everything so well that you wouldn't notice it was there. I left the room quickly, giving Kevin a nod as I left. All sorted, no more noise from that AC, I told him, and he barely looked up from his screen. It felt a bit like being James Bond, to be honest. Kevin had no clue, and I was closer to finding out the truth about my wife. Pretty intense, right? With some extra time, I took care of a few important tasks. I went to the bank and got cashier's checks for half of our money from both our checking and savings accounts. Then, I canceled our joint credit cards. After that, I met with my broker to adjust our investment accounts, making sure everything was split fairly. Next, I went to Planters National Bank in Marietta, Georgia, and opened new accounts just in my name. I deposited the cashier's checks there. I had lunch in Marietta, although I wasn't very hungry. After lunch, I went to my broker's office to go over the changes to our investments. We made sure to divide them evenly without selling anything to avoid extra taxes. I took the paperwork home with me. Following that, I met with my attorney to go over the divorce papers he had prepared. I suggested a no-fault divorce with a fair split of our assets if my wife agreed to sign them right away. If she refused, we included a provision for filing for divorce based on adultery. I was pretty sure she would sign them immediately. With everything sorted, All I had left was to grab dinner and then head to the station for the Monday Night Football broadcast. After leaving my attorney's office, I turned on my cell phone and found a couple of messages from Sharon. She seemed worried and asked me to come home before the game, saying she was deeply concerned about my recent behavior. She also told me how much she loved me and how torn up she felt seeing me like this. Despite knowing her plans for the evening and having my own knowledge of them, receiving those messages from her made me doubt my judgment. I felt like a fool for loving and trusting her. I had made up my mind. The fate of my marriage depended on whether she showed up at the motel that night. Her choice would show if she cared enough to try and save our relationship, recognizing how fragile it was. At 8:00 p.m., I set up the system in fully automated broadcast mode, and Monday Night Football started. I set it to monitor the feed from the motel room. At precisely 8:15, I saw Bob enter the room and heard him make a call, saying, "Hey baby, I'm here in the room. Come over as soon as you can." Sharon responded, "Okay honey, I'll be there in a few minutes." After they hung up, Bob muttered a few more words that I caught, although I would need to listen again later to confirm exactly what he said. Watching this unfold, it felt like my marriage was falling apart. Even though I didn't expect her to end it, the pain was still sharp. This experience strengthened my resolve to make them face the consequences. I took out my list of people to contact and started calling, a task that took nearly half an hour. Sharon had already arrived at the motel. I went back to monitoring the video and audio feed. Sharon expressed, "Oh God, Bobby, thinking about being intimate with you excites me so much. I treasure these nights together," she revealed. Bobby responded by inviting her closer, saying, "Tonight, my love, I'll fulfill your desires." She replied, "I love it when you speak passionately to me, Bobby." My heart sank, and I felt sick to my stomach. A pastor, a church secretary, and my once loving wife were descending into a dark place of depravity that I couldn't understand. In the moments that followed, I saw how twisted things had become. They both deserved the consequences that were coming. There was no question about it. It's painful to even recall the details. She positioned herself on the bed, and I couldn't bear to describe what happened next. The person I once loved so deeply, he completed his act, and it became clear that our relationship was beyond repair. Despite my immense pain, my rage kept me focused. If they had seen me at that moment, they might have felt the weight of my anger. I had lost much of my compassion. My sole goal was to hold them accountable. After enduring their actions for 45 minutes, I couldn't take it anymore. It was halftime during the football game, so I switched the system to live assist mode and played back the recording of Bob and Sharon from the start. It must have been a whirlwind of emotions and tension at that moment. Ignoring the buzzing phones, I dialed Sharon's number from my cell phone. The sound echoed through the monitors, catching her attention. She noticed my call and remarked that it was me calling this time. Determined, I redialed, prompting her to finally answer, albeit with a sharp tone. I greeted her, asking about her whereabouts and plans. She mentioned she had been out shopping since I hadn't contacted her earlier and was going to get some food before returning home. It must have been incredibly tense. I asked sarcastically if she was shopping, and she confirmed, mentioning she planned to spend a lot. I couldn't help but sarcastically thank her for being such a great wife. She didn't take kindly to my tone, telling me not to speak to her that way and expressing confusion about my recent behavior before ending the call. I couldn't help but feel the weight of her words, especially her use of that term again. "No, Sharon, the real issue is Bob in that motel room." As their activities seemed to be winding down, and she took one last jab, I thought about interrupting them, knowing she wouldn't answer her phone again. That must have been incredibly intense. I called the motel and asked Kevin to connect me to the Whirlpool suite where Sharon was. When she answered, I got straight to the point. I told her I knew about her affair and that I planned to file for divorce, leaving her without a place to stay. I also hinted at potential consequences for Bob. She was understandably confused and asked what I was talking about, but I didn't elaborate. I simply told her to turn on Monday Night Football and enjoy the halftime show, ending the call with a goodbye. That must have been a surreal moment, witnessing the fallout of your actions in real time. After Sharon and Bob saw the incriminating video, their reactions were frantic. Sharon screamed in disbelief and quickly left, while Bob expressed his anger with curses. Unbeknownst to him, his muttered words could potentially be used against him later. Once they had left the motel room, I turned off the monitors and let the video stream play for a bit longer. Then, I switched the system back to its regular broadcast mode. I grabbed the evidence tape and left the broadcast booth, knowing it might be my last time there. I also took some personal items from my desk before leaving. I spent the rest of the night at Frankie's, and everyone there was talking about what happened during the halftime show on Monday Night Football. After the game ended, I took a taxi back home. When I got there, Sharon was sitting in the dark living room alone. The phone wasn't working, and she was crying a lot. Her tears didn't affect me because I felt like our relationship was over. She cried and asked, "How could you do this to me, Head? After all these years together, how could you?" I replied firmly, "No, Sharon. The real question is, how could you do this to me? I'm drunk, and I'm going to bed. We can talk tomorrow." She stayed still as I walked away and went to sleep in the spare bedroom. The next morning, I woke up feeling terrible from the hangover, and Sharon was still on the sofa looking exhausted with dark circles under her eyes. It seemed like she hadn't slept at all. But I didn't pay much attention. She had brought this situation upon herself. I casually put the phone back on its stand, and it immediately started ringing. For the next hour and a half, I answered calls from family members, including her parents, friends, people from the church, my former boss, and both of my daughters. They were all deeply upset by what they had seen, and nothing I said could calm them down. I knew it was tough for them to witness that, but they were adults and would eventually get past it. I got a call from Mrs. Bob asking if I had a recording of what happened. I told her I did and could share it if needed. Everyone I called had seen the Monday Night Football halftime show, and they told me about it. Some were upset by the explicit content, while others, like Sharon's parents, thought it was wrong of me to expose her like that. But many people understood why I did it. It was tough to go through, but I knew it was the consequence of what I did. Sharon kept crying, sitting there, as the situation unfolded. I didn't put the phone back on the stand and went to make some coffee. When I returned, I offered Sharon a cup and handed her the divorce papers and investment documents she needed to sign. I said, "Sharon, I'm filing for divorce because I found out about your cheating and saw what happened last night. It's clear you've been unfaithful for a long time, maybe over a year. I can't stay in this marriage anymore." I showed her the papers. "These are the divorce papers. I'm asking for a no-fault divorce and suggesting we split everything equally. You need to sign both the divorce agreement and the agreement about our investments for this to happen. I won't change anything in these documents. They're fair to you. I'll give you until 5 p.m. today to talk to a lawyer and see if my offer is fair. After that, I won't wait anymore, and I'll start the divorce process because of your cheating. I'll ask for a fair division of our property, considering our contributions and incomes. Basically, I'll ask for as much as I can get. I want you to understand this is the best offer you'll get, so think about it seriously." I warned her, and it wouldn't be smart to argue against a divorce based on cheating when everyone in Atlanta knows it's true. Everyone knows you cheated. This is what you wanted, as I heard you say to Bob. Your wish came true, and now everyone knows. Take the deal, Sharon, it's your best chance. She pleaded, "Head, I love you, and I want to save our marriage. Can't we try to fix this?" I replied firmly, "Sharon, love doesn't change what happened. Our marriage ended when you chose him over me, and that choice was made when you started the affair. Now it's time for you to talk to your lawyer and decide." In the afternoon, she came back with the papers. "My lawyer thinks signing these is the best move, Head. He says it's fair given what happened. Head, can we talk? Can you hear me out and think about forgiveness and fixing things between us?" she pleaded. I agreed to have a conversation because I wanted to grasp why she acted as she did and whether this was a one-time occurrence. We sat down, and she opened up. She confessed that it was her first affair, starting just before she joined Bob's workplace. She couldn't explain why it happened since she was content with our marriage. However, she felt drawn to Bob, mentioning his charm and the sense of affection he showed her. "So there's this person named Sharon, and I'm thinking about her. She's a bit like someone who says sorry after messing up in a marriage. She keeps apologizing, trying to fix her mistake by crying and looking sad. It seems like she believes feeling bad is enough to fix everything, even though she didn't take her promises seriously. It's like when a dog destroys your homework and then tries to act cute, thinking you won't be mad. Tough luck, Sharon. Life isn't a game, and saying sorry doesn't magically fix everything. Just being sorry isn't always good enough, you know." Then, I noticed Bob's charm, but I changed Sharon's view when I played 2 recordings I had saved. In the first one, Bob whispered on the first day, "That person better make sure her husband doesn't find out about our affair." The second recording was just before Sharon arrived, and Bob said, "I'm going to use her tonight. Tomorrow, I'll warn her that I'll end our relationship if she causes any more trouble." I also threatened to tell the boss. That should make her behave. I can't take the risk of her husband finding out about us and telling everyone. "So Sharon, you not only hurt our marriage, but you were also wrong about Bob's feelings for you," I explained. "No, Sharon, I can't stay married to you for 2 reasons. First, you broke our promises to each other, and I can't accept that. And second, even if we stayed together, you wouldn't be happy with me anymore. I wouldn't be able to make you happy after what happened. No, Sharon, even if we love each other, it won't be enough to fix what you've done to our marriage," I concluded. She just sat there, crying, knowing that what I said was true. Eventually, she signed the divorce papers. I told her I was moving out, giving her time to find a new place to live. I didn't think she could afford the house, and to be honest, I didn't want to stay there either. We agreed to sell the house and split the money equally, just like our other belongings. Plus, the house reminded me of too many memories I wanted to leave behind. I packed up the paperwork and bags I had prepared the day before and left the house. I went to my broker's office to drop off the papers and then checked into a hotel for the night. The next morning, I met with my lawyer. We talked about the divorce papers, and he said he would file them with the county court that same day. During our meeting, we also discussed the situation I was in at the radio station and with the FCC. My lawyer told me that the FCC could give out fines, take away broadcasting licenses, or refuse to renew them. If someone broke these rules in federal court, they could get fined or even face up to 2 years in jail. However, my lawyer thought it was unlikely I'd go to jail, but I definitely have to pay big fines and I'd have to stop working in broadcasting. I'd have to find a new job. In just a few days, I realized the serious consequences of what I'd done. I got legal notices from the FCC and had to spend several days in court defending myself. Long story short, I ended up with a fine that was almost as much as a year's salary, wiping out my savings. Even worse, I lost my broadcasting license and I couldn't work in my field for the next 2 years. But there was a bit of good news. TT saw what happened on Monday Night Football, and despite how wrong it was, he was understanding. He offered me a job with tasks that followed the FCC's rules. It seemed like TT had his own troubles during his recent divorce, especially with Henry's daughter and Peter's sister. Maybe that's why he was more understanding towards me. I guess I had one thing to thank TT for. At one point, Bob confronted me at Frankie's. He looked like he was about to hit me, but somehow I managed to grab one of his arms tightly. "Listen, Bob, I never want to hear from you again." "Got it?" I said firmly. He grumbled, "Fine." I felt like giving him one last kick. "Bob, I have a recording of you threatening me. If I take that to the police, I could get a restraining order against you and maybe even press assault charges. With the evidence I have, you could end up in prison. Is that what you want?" I asked him. He shook his head, disagreeing, as I gave him one final kick for emphasis. "Well then, I guess this is the end of our interaction. He's not a pastor anymore. He lost his job at the church, and the denomination took away his license and ordination. Last I heard, he's working at a travel agency in the city. His wife divorced him because of his affair, and she got a big settlement. I'm moving forward with my life. It's not perfect, but I'm finding ways to be happy. I've dated a few women lately, but nothing too serious. When the right woman comes along, I'll marry her. I know it's just a matter of time, and I'm ready to wait for the right person. I sometimes bump into Sharon at events like Stephanie's graduation or Melanie's baby's baptism. I'm polite, but I've made it clear I don't want to be friends or have any kind of relationship with her. It's obvious she's not happy. I can see she's hurting from our breakup and regrets what she did. But the problem isn't her regret. It's that she betrayed me and our marriage. Maybe if I were different, I could forgive her, but I have strong values and there's not much room for compromise. She'll have to live with knowing she gave up our life together for her affair with Bob. I was just a regular guy who loved her deeply, but she chose to throw it all away. Yes, she let me go. Sadly for her, she also lost any respectability, especially after her embarrassing performance during the Monday Night Football halftime show. Everyone knows she cheated on me. There are rumors she gets lots of date offers, but to her credit, she's turned them down. It's not a fulfilling way to live, but I didn't do this to her. She brought it on herself.